Welcome to the Published Author Podcast, where we help entrepreneurs learn how to write a book and leverage it to grow their business and make an impact. I'm your host, Josh Steimle. Today, my guest is Tobin Slaven. Tobin has been called an introverted savant with a superpower for helping entrepreneurs find their tribe and sparking conversations out of thin air. An entrepreneur, Tobin has created the 4 Gears of Marketing methodology designed to help entrepreneurs find their ideal clients. Tobin is co-author of the new book, Experts Never Chase. Tobin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Josh. You know I'm a long time and a big time fan of yours, so this is going to be a lot of fun for me.
Well, I'm a fan of yours as well, and this is fun. Tobin is the first member of our masterclass, the Published Author Masterclass, to finish his book and get it done and get it published and out there. So this is really fun to interview him and find out more about his book journey. But first, let's find out a little bit more about you, Tobin. Give us some background. Who are you? Where did you come from? And lead us up to your interest in writing a book.
Yeah, I think I've been an entrepreneur for the last 15 years or so. And Josh, you're in Boston, so you're going to understand this analogy really well. I think I grew up in Maine, so it's very pertinent for us New Englanders. But what I did about 4 or 5 years ago was the equivalent of leaving the Boston Red Sox to go play for the Yankees. And the reason why I frame it that way is most of my work in the digital marketing space was list building, push send. It was all one-to-many digital marketing. And it was always about efficiency and automation and do the least amount of work for the biggest results. But about 4 or 5 years ago, I got really frustrated in that space. And we can talk about why. But what I did was I went all in on having one-to-one conversations with people, doing the things that wouldn't scale. And the book that we wrote is about the process and the journey that I've been on, making a whole bunch of mistakes the last 3 or 4 years, trying to do this in a more elegant way, and finally figuring out a process that works really well for us, but also a number of clients that have been through workshops with us that now use it the same way.
So what was it that frustrated you about the one-to-many model?
The inconsistency of the results, honestly. It was heartache to take money from clients and run these campaigns and not get the results that we expected or promised. We had some stellar results. At one point, one of my clients said, and this was a team effort, it wasn't just me, but we produced $1.5 million with 2 emails. Now, that's because we built a lot of positive rapport with the folks on that list, but we had a lot of success in that area. It just was getting harder and harder. And I think we see this, all of us sort of recognize this, that we're starting to tune out that marketing stuff. Like we particularly with the pandemic, I think we crave real connections with people. And I just got to a place where I said, for myself and for the folks I'm working with, if I have to prove the results, like if someone put a gun to my head and said, you've got to produce results, how are you going to do that? It was this, go out, talk to people, remove all the marketing that's creating distance between you and the people you want to do business with.
So explain to me how this changed your business, because you were running a consultancy, essentially, doing email campaigns, one-to-many marketing. How do you adapt to doing these one-on-one things? Like, what did that look like? How did you work with clients that way?
Yeah, so I've actually had a couple iterations. So I had a social media marketing agency. I've done a bunch of content marketing along the way. We did the email campaigns. At one point, my agency was doing newsletters, curated newsletters for our clients, which was sort of a really fun space to be in. But I was watching the open rates going down, even though we were doing a lot of things right. We were many times 2 to 3 times higher than the industry averages. I was still watching those open rates and engagement rates diminish. And at the same time, I went out and started looking at, like, how do you personalize? How do you actually, you heard in the bio, I'm pretty introverted. So I did not find this easy to go networking, for example, to go to a Chamber of Commerce event and meet people that way. But I've found that in the online space, reaching out on LinkedIn, through email or through Facebook, there is a process where you can actually meet people in a comfortable and fun sort of way. You don't have to come across as a weirdo on the web. And one of my favorite words that I think perfectly describes what's happening on LinkedIn these days is the leg humpers. These people that just show up, they've got an agenda, they're all about what they have and want to sell. And the minute you kind of say, no, I'm not interested, they're gone and you never see them again. And I just didn't want to play in that space. If that was required to do the work, I wasn't interested.
Yeah, those people drive us all crazy.
Yeah. So, and I think what I would say to the business owners out there is that's not the only way to do it. And a lot of folks have sort of bought that I have to use automation, for example. I have to do a lot of what's the perfect script that I can send to people that will get them interested in me? And the answer is there isn't one. Because if it's a copy and paste script, you automatically are removing your biggest asset, which is creating that human to human connection.
You know, I've noticed this in my own business. Our marketing agency, MWI, we do PR work. And so we're sending out pitches. But when I was writing for Forbes and these other publications, I was on the other end of it, getting the pitches. And at one point when I was writing for like Forbes and Mashable and TechCrunch and like all these publications at the same time, I was getting hundreds of PR pitches every month. And it was like everybody bought the same template somewhere. Like, seriously, I was like, is there a book or something that teaches people how to do this? Because I would get the exact same email pitches from different PR firms all around the world. And some of these were really well-established, reputable PR firms, like they should have known better. And every once in a while, somebody would send me an email. And of course, you put the name at the front, but everybody can do that. But then they would stick in a few bits of information that let me know I've only sent this email to you and to nobody else. And I thought, how come everybody should be doing this? And yet it was 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 1,000 that would actually customize the email so that I could instantly tell they're only sending this email to me. It's a custom email. And then I would read those emails. All the others, I could identify in 2 seconds. This is a form email. It's going out to 200 people. I just delete those. I don't even read those.
Yeah, your experience, I think we've all had that. And sometimes in the marketing space, we forget what it feels like to be the user or the receiver of these messages. But what you cited was, in our book, we kind of talk about it as rule number 2, which is every message that is sent has to be 100%, the person is 100% sure and certain that that message was meant for them and them alone. And you do that by tying into the details that are only pertinent to them and would not have been sent to anyone else. And it completely changes the conversation. And I would challenge folks that say, I don't have time for this, is do you have time to burn your reputation with people? Because you only get that first impression once. And I want to create relationships with people I want to do business with. I don't want to drive people away that say, he treated me like a number, like I was a number on his spreadsheet to get more sales.
Now, so are you doing this on behalf of clients, like helping them to implement these one-to-one programs? Is that what you do? Or
I did for a while. So several years ago, we had a lead gen agency. And in fact, I'm just owning this. We tried running automation because that's what the experts were saying. Like, this is the process. And because I came from that marketing background, it made sense to how do you do this at scale? But short answer is no, we're not doing it for clients directly, where I am coaching and working with clients to figure out what this process looks like for them. Because when you make some slight customizations, it can be really effective, but it always works best when people are running it in their own business instead of just farming it out to an agency to do on their behalf. We do work with folks, and one of the areas of specialty we developed is sort of a team-based approach. So I don't know if you have someone else in the business working with you, Josh, that might be, for example, doing business development on your behalf, looking for opportunities. But there's a dynamic when, particularly if it's a junior person and they don't have your background. Like if you and I meet, I'm like, holy cow, yeah, I want to connect with Josh. Like, look at what he's done in his career. But someone on your team might not bring that same background to the table. So knowing how to work with those dynamics, it can actually be to their advantage if it's positioned the right way when they're doing outreach on your behalf. So we work with those dynamics, but it's more coaching and consulting around how teams can do that for themselves.
Got it. So tell us about the genesis of the idea for your book. So I've got my copy right here, Experts Never Chase. So do you remember the moment when you said, I'm going to write a book and this is what it's going to be about?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, and it's going to sound a little bit dramatic, but I can tell you this is 100% true. And it didn't happen once. It's actually happened multiple times because I think part of this is just being an entrepreneur. But it's that 2 a.m., 3 a.m. sweats, laying in bed, projecting out over the next couple of weeks, knowing that we have bills to pay and sort of all those financial pressures that we face, and thinking to myself, I don't know where my next client is coming from. And even worse, I don't even see anyone on the radar. Like I don't feel hopeful because I don't see that person who should be sort of arriving as a new client in the process. And that scared me to death. And so this process was specifically me going out and saying, I need help in this area. I'm going to find the best coaches in the world to work with me to figure out what they're doing to solve this one problem. And several of those guys are actually really good friends of mine now. And I think they will tell you that what we learn from others, I always give credit to where I was able to adopt really good ideas, but I think we've put some unique spins on what we do. And they would tell you that we're up amongst the world leaders. Like we're doing some cutting edge stuff in that space too.
So when did this all happen? When did you get the idea for the book?
Yeah. So I started writing, probably 2 or 3 years ago. I took a first cut at the book was with a different title, but it was an early version of our process. And at that time, I worked with a ghostwriter she had gone through our program. So she knew the program that we were running at the time. And she helped me write up a first version of the book based on the program. Honestly, I didn't publish that book because I didn't think it was good enough. I didn't think our program and our material at the time was good enough to get the consistent results that I expected and wanted out there. So I kind of tabled that book. Essentially, the book was written once and just never got published, but we kept iterating and improving mostly through workshops. So the process that's in the book is the exact same thing that we're teaching in the workshops. Like it's very hands-on. Like this is the feedback I got, and that's why it's a better book today. And then the other thing that happened so I wrote about 50,000 words in the first draft of the book, and I kind of got stuck. I got frustrated. I got in that place where I didn't want to pick the book up anymore. It just felt painful to even read it and rewrite and do the edits. And so I made a decision. I reached out to one of my friends who does very similar work. Essentially, you could call her a competitor in the space where she and I seeking clients to sort of do this coaching work with them. And I reached out to Kat Stansick and I said, I think you and I should work on this together. I have the book almost there, but I think it would be a better book if you and I teamed up on this. And I'm so glad I did because she brings a really unique voice. If you guys have ever met Kat, and if you don't, you should follow her. She has a really unique voice in the space. She's great with one-liners. She has a fun sense of humor. But having that male-female dynamic, two different providers she's doing workshops and programs herself, but she talks about things differently than I do. The process is very similar. It's all organic outreach, conversational outreach. But I just think that this was the best decision, and we've had a lot of fun putting it together. And honestly, I'm not sure I could have finished without her because I was at that place where, in French, j'en ai ras le bol. I'd reached that top.
Such a great point here that there's so many reasons to bring on a co-author. One you mentioned was they help you actually get it done, which for a lot of authors, you get the book 90% done, 95% done, 99% done, and you still just can't get it across the finish line, and a co-author can help with that. Or they can help you start it or just get it through. You also mentioned that they bring a different voice to it or a different perspective, which makes it a better book and more relatable. And also in your case, you said having the male-female dynamic, that makes it more appealing for everybody out there. So it's not just a kind of male-centric book or a female-centric book, but it can appeal to both genders. And the great thing about having a co-author is you get all these benefits and there's no real cost to it. I mean, we feel like there's a cost, like, oh, I'm sharing the cover. And especially with a competitor, you feel like, oh, they're going to take half the business. But it's really not the way it works. It ends up being a win-win for everybody because you have a better book, you get more clients. Sure, they get clients too, but there's enough clients to go around.
Yeah, I think that's an important part that it's, we live in a world of information abundance, right? There's more information than any of us can ever consume. And so I tend to think that abundance carries over. There are clients who will be the perfect fit for Kat. And then I believe that there'll be enough for me as well. And if there's one piece of advice I'd share, maybe if someone's wrestling with this question about, this was what I had to sort of acknowledge on my end, which was there is a little bit of giving up of the ego to take on a co-author. So in our case, when we started out, I had basically written the first version of the book, or the second version, as you heard before, because the first one went in the trash. But I had written 50,000 words. Almost the whole book was there. And so when we started, Kat sort of acknowledged that and felt like she was coming in to assist me. And so my name was first on the cover of the book. We actually reversed that because she contributed so much in the rewriting and editing process that so much of the book that we have now is equally her and mine, that we flipped the names around. We put her first listed as the first author listed on the bottom of the book and on the cover because she earned it. It was that big an impact. But I think if I had a lot of ego caught up in it, that might have been a hard decision to accept. In my case, I was happy to do this with her. Again, it's a better book and we had a lot of fun doing it.
Great mindset. Now, you ran a Kickstarter campaign for this, which is really interesting. Let's get into that a little bit. How did you even decide that you wanted to do a Kickstarter for this? What was the purpose?
Being in the digital marketing space, I like exploring new territory and doing unique things. So that was the appeal. I've never run a Kickstarter before, so I didn't bring a lot of experience to the table, but I've wanted to do one for a while. I just find it really interesting, this idea of gathering a group of people together and getting them to buy into the vision of what you're creating, and then using that as a mechanism to get it out in front of more folks in the world. Kat was a little bit, I don't want to say leery, but she was like, okay, let's try this. But it wasn't her idea and she wasn't fully on board at the start. She's kind of like, I think we should go for the Amazon bestseller campaign. And I said, well, I'm not opposed to that too. That's great. Although I think a lot of us know there's a game to be played on that, right? If you play the game, you can get that status. I wanted to do something a little different. And so we launched the Kickstarter. With 10 days to go left in the campaign, we were at 22% of goal. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with Kickstarter, the rules are it's all or nothing. So any orders for the book that we had received would have been refunded if we didn't reach 100% of goal. So that created a lot of pressure on us.
And you were only at 22%, right?
Yeah. Only 22%. And, a lot of Kickstarters see activity near the end, but I don't think we would have reached our goal numbers if we hadn't sort of kicked it into gear in that last week. And I would equate it to a good old fashioned barn raising. Like I reached out to friends. I had family friends that came in a big way. And I just said, this is a project we're working on. This is why we believe in it, why we think it's valuable for others. Would you help me get the word out? Would you support? And some folks supported with dollars. Some folks interviewed us on podcasts like this and helped us get the word out. And we ended up at 131% when we finished. And it just, what that has done is created, we had fun bonuses for the folks that supported. In fact, we're going to do several workshops with those people who supported the Kickstarter as well. And we had created layers, reward layers in the Kickstarter. So you could get a signed copy of the book for $35, a little bit higher than what you pay on Amazon, but they were sort of buying into this bigger campaign. But there was also a $100, a $500 level. We even had a $2,500 and $7,500 level to the Kickstarter. Now, I didn't end up finding those angel sponsors for the Kickstarter that way at that level, but I think it created a conversation with folks. And we had several people look at it and say, at that level, it was really a combination of our consulting services plus support of the Kickstarter in a way that, does this make sense for their business? So I think you can be creative and do unique things that allowed us to dovetail with what we're doing in our businesses, even beyond the book.
So at what point did you get past the 100% funded mark? Was it down to the wire or?
No, I think we probably 4 or 5 days to go, we went over 100%. In fact, I had one of my clients actually jumped in and pledged the exact dollar amount to get us to 100%. But the interesting thing is that after we hit 100%, we started seeing more activity, including names that I didn't recognize. So the early days of the Kickstarter, it's your friends, it's your family, it's your clients and peers, and like folks are supporting you because they support you. But then it starts to take on, and then near the end of the Kickstarter, started to see more and more names of folks that were showing up. I didn't know who they were. Kat didn't recognize the name either, but they saw the book and they were conversing with them now, and they really liked the premise of the book. They could see how that could be valuable for them in their business.
Awesome. Now, with the Kickstarter, did you do any like paid advertising or anything else, or was it purely word of mouth marketing?
It was all organic. There was 0% paid in it. And honestly, it's the same process that we talk about in the book, which is essentially real relationships. This is why when you do the conversational outreach, you can approach someone and have a conversation with them, and it does not have to be a sales conversation. It can be genuinely trying to know and get to know that other person. And when you build that rapport, you essentially have created an extended network that you can then go back to. So, I went out to my network, like I said, everyone from childhood friends to folks that I've worked with in the last few weeks, and said, this is what we're doing. And that's really the promise of the book that we wrote was, you should be able to read this book, follow the steps that we've laid out for you. We're going to show you examples, and go get a new client in your business before you finish the last pages of the book. And I felt like if we could deliver on that product, on that promise, that we would have a book. It's the kind of book I would want to read. If one other person gets that benefit out of it, it was well worth putting the time into.
Quick break here. Are you an entrepreneur? Do you want to write a book that will help you grow your business? Visit publishedauthor.com, where we have programs to fit every budget, programs that will help you write and publish your book in as little as 90 days, starting at just $39 per month. Or, if you're too busy to write your book, we'll interview you and then write and publish your book for you. Don't let the valuable knowledge and experience you have go to waste. Head on over to publishedauthor.com to get the help you need to become a published author. You've already waited long enough. Do it today. Now, back to the show. So let's talk a little bit more about the connection between the book and your business. Is the content in the book 100% what you do in your business, or is it a little bit more loosely linked?
No, it is what we do. It's a hybrid of what Kat does and what I do. So you're getting examples from both of us of clients that we've worked with. But when I do the workshops, I have a series of workshops that it's a 10-day sprint, and it's $3,000. And essentially that same content that we put into that workshop is in a condensed version in the book. We didn't hold anything back, because my belief is that some people are going to read the book and they're going to go get results, and that's great. If they bought the book or someone gave it to them, either way, they're going to benefit from that experience. Other people are going to want a deeper dive. They're going to want someone to give them feedback. They're going to want to adapt the messaging. And so in those cases, those are folks who would be clients or in the workshop experience, and happy to support them. And the book essentially will be an asset of the workshop. We'll, as people come into the workshop, we'll get the book in their hands so they can read it in that form, but we're really working the process more hands-on with them until they enroll those folks. Cool.
So tell us a little bit about the actual publishing process. So who did you go through for this? It's hardcover, the copy that I'm holding right here. So it looks like you went through Ingram Spark, maybe? Or
yeah, so we did. We have an editor who helped sort of guide us in that process, get the manuscript set up for uploading. We did Ingram Spark for the hardcover, and we're doing Kindle. We chose not to do a soft cover. We may in the future add it if people are really interested in it. And we also made a decision early on to go a little bit higher in the pricing. So my thought process, or our thought process at the time, was this book is valuable. This is the same thing I do for myself on a day-to-day basis. Use this to go get a client. If you're not willing to, I think we set it at $27. If you're not willing to do that for your book, then maybe this isn't, we pay attention to things we pay for. So whether it's a $22 book or a $27 book doesn't ultimately make a big difference to my wallet or to yours or anyone else's. But what if you're paying a little bit more and it forces you to say this book could be really valuable for me? I think that's a good thing.
know a guy who's taken that to the extreme. Rich Litvin, he's a coach for coaches, and he sells the paperback version of his book for $75 on Amazon. And he's like, "Hey, it's worth it."
Yeah.
I'm like, "That's interesting. That's I'll have to have
I've
him
seen
on the
some
show and
folks
see
go
how
to
that's worked out
$500 and $1,000 books for the same reason. Obviously, I think that there are some folks out there that are doing good work, meaning the world's going to be a better place if they have more clients and they make their positive impact. So if this book, that seems like a fair trade. If all they did was buy the book, go enroll several clients from it, I think that's a win for everybody. It's good karma in the world.
Yeah, exactly. So other than when you were talking about some of the hangups you had, getting the book done, finishing the book, what were some of the parts that worked out more easily for you? Because at the beginning, it sounded like you were cranking it out a couple of years ago and just getting a lot of content out. What was easy for you? And then can you tell us a little bit more about where you got hung up and why you think that stopped?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question, actually, because this is probably a question that I would pose. I would turn back to you, Josh, because I'm very curious to hear your perspective on this. I intend to write additional books in the future, so I want to avoid this pitfall that I found myself sort of in, that I had to climb around to get out of. And so if I can plan ahead in the future, that might be great too for myself and for others who hear this. But what worked really well for me, what I feel good about that I did with the book that I will do in the future, the first draft of the book was really written as a series of letters. So it was 4 people, real people. One of them a friend of mine, 3 others were people that I had met on LinkedIn. Interestingly, all of their names started with B. It was 2 men, 2 women. But I would every time I sat down to write, the first words were "Dear B," and then I would write a letter to that person. And so I had created an outline of what I thought needed to be in the book. I knew our process, I knew the rough structure. I had gone through your process, the published author process. So I worked through the workbooks, and I think I had a really good grasp of what I wanted the table of contents and the outline and structure to look like. And so the flesh, the words of the book really were, the first version at least, was written as a series of letters, love letters to these bees, of imagining how they must feel. And in a couple of cases, I knew what they were feeling, of where they were in their business and where they were struggling and what they really needed. So I was answering questions that I anticipated they'd want to know or would be asking. Where I got stuck was taking that raw material and sort of reorganizing it. It still had to fit the outline and the format, but there needed to be a lot of chipping away. It wasn't fluff. It was just, because it was written as a series of letters, Kat would say, you sort of talked about this piece of the work like 5 times in 5 different ways in 5 different places, because it was written sort of as Lego pieces that got stuck together. And so I think in the future, I would try to maybe organize my outline better at the start in writing those series of letters. I'm not sure how I could avoid that, but by the time I got to the point that I needed to cut away, I just didn't want to work with it anymore. I was sort of mentally done.
Yeah. Did it just feel like too much work? Like you knew there was stuff to clean up and you just felt like, oh, I don't want to go through all that?
Yes. Yes. I don't think I'm a great editor. Also, by personality, I'm a really good, give me a machete and let me hack my way through the jungle. I love exploring. But if you ask me to build a road behind me, that's someone else is going to be way better at that job. And I think Kat was really good. She had already published a book herself, solo, prior to this. And I think she was really good at sort of taking the information and assimilating it with her own and then reorganizing it. And then we had an editor also reading through. And the editor, we've actually had a couple friends read the book, and they've said, this is pretty good. I'm already changing how I'm conversing with my prospects and clients. They saw an immediate sort of lift in what they could do to have those conversations in a more natural, organic, I think elegant kind of way. And that felt pretty good. That was a validation I was looking for, that this should be a useful book. This isn't just a book full of stories.
That's great. Yeah, for my part, when I get stuck on stuff, and I've been in your shoes too, I've got 2 books right now that I'm stuck on. And one of them is the workbook that you were mentioning for the Published Author Masterclass, that I got so much of that done. I mean, it's like 350 pages right now. And then it just became huge, and it became kind of a slog to get through it. But what I found with the workbook and other books I've written and articles as well that I've written in the past is usually when I get hung up on something, it's because I know that there's something that's not right about the manuscript, about the idea, about the title, but something about that is not right. And until I fix it, it's hard to move forward because I feel like I'm going to have to go back and redo it all otherwise. And sometimes I know what that thing is that's wrong, and it's easy to go fix, or at least it's easy to identify. And other times it's harder to pick out. And I feel like there's something holding me back and I don't know what it is. And actually with the workbook specifically, I just figured this out today, that what was holding me back on this is that, and now we're kind of getting into the weeds here a bit on the masterclass and everything, but through the masterclass, I've seen that there are some people who get hung up on certain parts of the workbook. For example, I say in the workbook, you need to build an email list. So go out and get ConvertKit or whatever, and set up an email list and start building that email list. Well, some people just quit writing their book right there. They're like, oh, I don't know how to do this. This is overwhelming. The technology, I've never done this before. And they quit everything. They quit writing the book and everything. Well, when I got that feedback, I realized, well, that's not right. It's better to have a book out there with no email list than not ever get anything out there. So I realized I need to write this workbook so that every section, every chapter has 2 parts to it. There's kind of the basic part, and then there's everything else that you can also do in addition to that. And I'm actually taking this from the 80-20 principle by Richard Koch, who that's just that Pareto principle idea that 20% of the inputs gives you 80% of the outputs. Well, when it comes to your book, there's the quick way to do it, the 20% version, and then there's the 100% way to do it. And I figure if people can do the 20% version, which is write the book and go publish it on Amazon and get it out there, well, that's better than nothing. Now, if you want to do the other 80%, you go hire an editor and you do it hardcover on Ingram Spark, or you want to spend more time doing research, that's great. You want to do your email list, that's great. But it's not necessary. The necessary stuff is the 20% version. And so now I'm rewriting the workbook, and now I feel like I'm on fire. I'm like, okay, that's what's been missing. Now I know what to do. And now I can just plow forward through the workbook. And now it's a lot easier going.
I think that's really helpful. And I also noticed that in life, there are different personalities. And I also believe that our personalities will shift in different situations. But you know how there was always that one person in school that, you know, if the teacher said do A, B, and C, they were going to do the whole alphabet all the way to X, Y, and Z. They're going to do everything. They're going to do it on the first day before the first class. Like so having that pathway for those folks that feel comfortable really grasping all the information they kind of need to see that, get into all of it that way. There are times in my life where I felt that way too, where I was going to consume everything as fast as I could. There are other times when I approach projects and I say, what is the minimal amount that I have to do here to, you know, what are the check boxes? I'm really busy. I'm going to do what's required of me and nothing more, because that makes the most sense. And so I think having both pathways to be able to follow according to where a person's at in the process, that's really attractive. And Josh, I just want to say this is one of the things I love about you. You've been very transparent with us in the process as you put the material out there. Like, this was a great decision. It helped get me started. And now we have the book published. So that feels pretty darn good. And I've been following you for a while. I think you've always done, like, we run a social pod is with our clients. And that's something that I learned from you probably we've been doing it at least 3 years, maybe 4 years now with our social pod. And I learned, read one of your blog posts where you put really good information out there. And, I don't know if folks even know what social pods are, but they don't tend to last very long because there's a lot of fluff in them. And I think the fact that we have a group of people still around doing this together on a weekly basis 3 years later, I think you gave us some really good actionable advice in that.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'll have to interview you about that too. But yeah, it's, I want to practice what I preach, right? And I think when it comes to a book, speed really does trump quality to a point. I mean, it's possible to write a book that's so bad that it hurts you rather than help you. But I think it takes a lot more effort to write a book that bad than people realize. You can, because I've seen a lot of books out there that are not well written, that were never edited, that are full of typos, full of blatant mistakes. And yet I've seen people get speaking gigs off of those books. I've seen people land clients off of those books. I've seen people build a personal brand around those books. And so I think we worry a lot that the book has to be perfect. If anything is not just right, then I can't even put it out there because it will ruin me. And the truth is, you can write a book that's full of mistakes and a mess and all sorts of stuff. And as long as it's not really, really bad, it's going to be a net positive. And so the speed of getting that done matters so much. One of the other people I interviewed earlier, Sarah Weiss, so she published her book in 2.5 weeks or something, like wrote it and published it. And she wrote it in 1 week. And then she had somebody, a friend of hers, edit it the second week. And then she went on Amazon and published it print on demand, soft cover only, no Audible, no hardcover. She got it done in 2 weeks. And yeah, that book has some mistakes in it, but it's still got good material in it. And she's making hundreds of thousands of dollars off of this book. If she had spent another year or two writing that book, of course it would be a better book. But she would have missed out on 2 years of multiple six figures of business by waiting. So I think speed usually does trump the quality when it comes to writing a book that you're using to leverage to grow your business.
What I think helped me in that process was to always think there's another book. This does not have to be this is not the book that I will write. This is the book that I'm writing right now. And so that relaxed my need. I mean, our book is not perfect either. I would say from my end, I'm not a great storyteller. So I kept worrying in the back of my head, I don't think I have enough stories in this. I was thinking about books that I've read that I really enjoyed. I read a lot of nonfiction, but I'm like, I don't know if I've told enough stories in this book. Well, I solved that two ways. One was just to relax and say, you know what, this is a very actionable book and I'm okay if that's all it is. And two, Kat's a much better storyteller than I am. So that was part of, pulling her in. I knew she was great with the material, would have a really unique voice, and she could inject stories where, I was struggling to find the right story to illustrate the point.
Cool. Well, hey, Tobin, do you have any other pieces of advice for anyone who's an entrepreneur out there looking to write a book that they can leverage to grow their business? Any other tips or words of wisdom?
I'm not sure that this is a tip, but it's something that I learned in the process for myself. And that is, and I would, Kat's not here but I think she would agree with me on this as well, that writing a book forces you to a deeper level of awareness and knowledge of your own material. Because I think I entered this thinking, well, I know this, I've been teaching this workshop. But teaching a workshop over a couple of weeks is very different than condensing it into, I haven't done the audio yet, but I assume it's like maybe 5 or 6 hours of audio. You have to be on point with your material. And so where there are sort of weaknesses or weak points in your process that you might have not been aware of before, it's sort of revealed in this process. So I think I know the material better and I had to get much sharper in what we were doing. And so I appreciate that impact of the book. We're not going to make a ton of money selling the books. That was never the goal. But if it one makes the world a little bit better place because people are more into this, they realize there's a way to create this human connection and get business. That's a good impact on the world. Some of the folks will read the book and say, you know what, Kat's pretty cool. Tobin's he seems pretty cool too. Maybe we could do some work together or do a cool project. Like that's a nice outcome, but it's not going to be from selling the book per se. It's putting a piece of work out there that will make a positive impact.
That brings up 2 more questions. One, how do you envision people turning into clients from this book? Was there anything specific that you did inside the book or that you're doing with the book to turn it into clients? And second, I know the book just barely came out, but have you already gotten any results from it?
So that's an interesting question. For myself, I don't know that I have a new client specifically from the book because it's only a couple of weeks, but we had 69 supporters of the Kickstarter. So some of those folks are new people that I didn't know before. Some of them I knew the name, but I didn't really know the person. And I think one of the things that we're going to do to deliver on that, the promises made as part of the Kickstarter, is we're doing several bonus workshops with the supporters. Like one workshop was promised, the other one was added in as an extra. And that will be an opportunity to really get to know folks, vice versa, for them to get to know us as well, but share and help them at a deeper level. I fully expect that some of those folks probably will end up becoming long-term clients as well. That's been my experience. That's the process, is I'm looking for folks that we can do really cool projects together. And it's got to be a good fit. I have to be as enthused about their business as they are. And if I feel that, those are the folks that I want to work with. So that's sort of like the book by itself, someone reaching out, they may or may not become a client but if we can do this sort of enhanced engagement, was something we probably didn't do a great job of, and other people have done much, much better, is have sort of embedded Easter eggs throughout the book, like, halfway through the book. If you go to this, URL on our webpage, we've got this really cool resource for you. And so they build a treasure hunt into the book of different assets and resources. We didn't try to solve that puzzle. We just said, go to expertsneverchase.com. We're going to put all the good stuff there. And we're still building that as treasure chest for folks. Because throughout the Kickstarter, the URL was just forwarding to the Kickstarter. The new website's actually just coming up today. So,
perfect. Awesome. Well, if people want to find you, Tobin, learn more about you, connect with you, where's the best place for them to do it?
So I would say my name for the URL and for LinkedIn, tobinslaven.com, but it maybe is not an easy one to spell. I think expertsneverchase.com would be a good, memorable one. People can find a link, to my page and more information about the book there. You can also get to know Kat a little bit. And like I said, she's not party to this conversation, but she's done more than her share to get us here.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tobin, for being our guest here today and sharing your journey with us on the Published Author Podcast.
No, I appreciate you, Josh, and the work you're doing. You've created a great community, and it's exciting to see all the folks, different ideas that people are developing. So if I can be one of the people that published and someone gets a little inspiration and then next up to bat, that's even better.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tobin.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to spread the word, please give us a 5-star rating review and tell your friends to subscribe too. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. And if you're an entrepreneur interested in writing and publishing a nonfiction book to grow your business and make an impact, visit publishedauthor.com for show notes for this podcast and other free resources.